As the kids would say, society is absolutely cooked right now. I'm going to be apologizing a lot, as I am Canadian after all. Just gonna start this video by saying I do not own any rights to clips used within the video, and anything said is of my own personal opinion, kinda like mainstream media, lols, and parts meant to be of satirical purpose. Comedy is subjective to the viewer, and I like mine like my women and coffee. I am not trying to cause panic or hate, nor am I worried, as the delay will give testament. I'm well aware of the sensitivity of the topics and get everyone's senses are heightened at the moment too, rightfully so, as my original intent of this was to just cover a news story, but after seeing all the propaganda get juiced up this past week, I'd rather not add fuel to the fire, so to speak, though this may seem contradictory. I'm well aware of all the sources and authors of articles I've came across. I am asking as a Canadian-born citizen for proper authorities to peacefully stop these protests that aren't Canadian-related. In contrast to the Freedom Convoy and everything happening in the world today, nothing good will come from this. There are good people among all walks of life, but I am also aware the complete opposite exists. I am just simply showing that curiosity, freedom of speech, and checking your sources is of importance. More briefly put, being aware of your surroundings. Since I care for you and for my own benefit of allowing more time to get my point across, I'm starting this video with some clips from a simpler time to hopefully ease the mood. Please stick around till the end of the video, as it would be no different than cutting someone off mid-sentence with "hey how," which could then be, "hey how are you," "hey how do I fix this," or "hey how are you such an idiot?" Having a whole podcast of things to say in a short period of time while jumping through societal hoops has been difficult. Which is why I'm also talking as fast as humanly possible. I'm also human and gotta poop, probably more than I'd like. It's going to show how I came across this story, which has now hit headlines. It'll show timestamps and dates. Feel free to pause as I know I'm hitting you with a lot of info, much like our rapid news cycle of today, and that my dialogue will not be synced to what's being shown, unfortunately. My apologies. For summary, after the unfortunate events on New Year's, I was re-watching an old podcast I had seen. Earlier that day, I had an odd video come up in my feed prior to watching said podcast, one I don't normally frequent for clarification. I understand algorithms, and this video will even show that. I noticed the word she said, caliphate, which I had recognized from that odd video I seen earlier. Fast forward to the next day, as I'm finishing the said podcast, I realized her saying dates being of importance as well as embassies, among other things. I started to Google around, and at the time there were only 2 articles about it from smaller independent news outlets. I started to look into local events happening around the area, as I do live in a neighboring community, and into the posts I'm seeing come up on my feed and seeing all of these active IG accounts that are promoting these protests. Freedom of speech is good, in a peaceful manner. With everything going on, I'm sorry, but now is not the time. If you're curious as to why I have screenshots of everything, it's that due to our rapid news cycle, I have a habit of screenshotting things I find interesting to check out later. It also shows dates planned past the 18th, to touch on my earlier point that I am not worried, nor trying to promote hatred. We're all human, I can't stress this enough, and as much as there are good people among all walks of life, I'm aware there can also be shitty ones too. Now, during the day of Sunday, January 5th, I was mostly avoiding my phone and researching into the immigration crisis that's been going on for a while here in Canada, after I had read an article earlier in the weekend about the Rural Community Immigration Class Program. Though I'm not a qualified journalist by any stretch of the imagination, I've loosely had aspirations of becoming one for a while now, mostly due to free travel, but partly due to just being tired of, and I apologize, society becoming a bunch of coddled entitled children that are so entirely caught up in identifying themselves by their politics, religion, gender, though there's only 2, lols, race, sexual orientation, etc. Humility is key. People need to realize we're all just human at the end of the day. Comedy and laughter is good for the soul. I'm talking about peace and unity. John Munn. There's a lot to touch on there, but due to our apparent ADHD span of attention, I'm trying my best to keep this brief. Just like our news cycles, you mean to tell me, in that same sense to contradict myself as my over-explaining should give evidence, everyone I talk to now seemingly has ADHD, depression, anxiety, etc., or is that also a reflection of being products to our environment? Just like, and stay with me here, how most people are now all of a sudden viewing the real world by their identities, religions, politics, etc., or easier put, their feelings. In that I mean, if you can't see how you're being played, Just like deep state controls the government like a puppet, you yourselves are being controlled like puppets, getting triggered about your feelings in relation to real-world issues, promoting their propaganda, or easier put, organized chaos. Whether it's man versus woman, religion, sexual orientations, or even this Canada-US baloney. I understand both perspectives of all topics mentioned, but I suggest watching some mafia movies to better understand politics. Because unfortunately, for better or worse, the real world is not so cut and dry, black and white. In the real world is the gray matter, which might be unfair at times, but it's reality. We're all human and have feelings. It's separating the two. But anyways, back to it. The weave is deep. I had opened up Twitter while going to bed that evening on Sunday, and boom. It's now a national headline, which I am thankful for, and am aware it was first moved to an unknown location in a neighboring community, and now has been cancelled since. I can't stress this enough. There are good people among all walks of life. Not all people of certain demographics practice the same religion, or take it as seriously as others. Which there's nothing wrong with. A sense of community is a good thing. How come my ancestors have integrated into Western society, as many others have, and I know Canada has a horrible history in regard to the Indigenous, don't get me wrong there, but why is it seemingly the same demographic of a practiced faith that are having a hard time integrating and adapting to Western culture, instead trying to change it to reflect their radicalized views of their faith, much like what happened in India and several other countries? For context, the majority of India practices Hindu among other faiths. Since I'm slightly retarded with a high school education, I'll do my best with this analogy. Let's imagine, you're in high school, throwing a house party, a chill spot, for everyone to get along. Leaving your bullshit at the door, so to speak. Then as more people are coming over, which you're cool with, but you'll reach a point of max capacity. Now all of a sudden they're yelling and causing issues about things that happened outside the party, wanting to change the vibe of your party. Not very chill, brother. I'm also aware headlines have popped up recently about a peaceful ceasefire, which is great, but haven't been able to catch that fart in the wind yet as I was busy working on this. I apologize for using robot voice. I'm not trying to alarm anyone here, as I have fallen under the weather while curating this, or maybe sucked one too many wieners in my spare time, but in dealing with it I found comedy. Thank goodness for the technology used to make this a comedy, and humility is of utmost value amongst a society so torn apart. I hope you can get a laugh and know I am in no way, shape, or form promoting any hatred, just simply expressing my personal opinion. To reiterate again, I'm well aware that there are good people among all walks of life and shitty ones too, and that shit is not cool. I totally understand to some I may appear as the shitty side, though I know my intent is of goodwill and opinion-based. We all have one, much like our buttholes. I hope your biggest takeaway from this is that we're all human at the end of the day and just need to all chill the fuck out. The last clips are just a brief reference to what I came across, but I will let the last clip of the video explain itself. With that, back to original paid programming and my apparent right side of the room, comedy. And feeding into the bullshit just as everything previously mentioned was of my own opinion, this is also my opinion for clarification. Let's go Donny boy, fuck Trudeau, fuck your entitled sense of ideologically labeling, and mostly fuck your feelings, cause your feelings is what got us here, and your feelings aren't gonna get us out of it. We all have the same God, life is pretty darn cool and God is good. Peace and love, brother.
Hamza wants to do everything in his lifetime. He wants an Islamic Caliphate to be created in his lifetime.
A few days later, he flew to Ontario, Canada on July 10th and returned to the U.S. on July 13th on 2023.
Ideological subversion is the slow process which we call either ideological subversion or active measures or psychological warfare. What it basically means is to change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent that despite of the abundance of information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interests of defending themselves, their families, their community, and their country. It's a great brainwashing process which goes very slow. It takes from 15 to 20 years to demoralize a nation. This is the minimum number of years which requires to educate one generation of students exposed to the ideology of the enemy. In other words, Marxism-Leninism ideology is being pumped into the soft heads of at least 3 generations of American students without being challenged or counterbalanced by the basic values of Americanism. The demoralization process in the United States is basically completed already. Most of it is done by Americans to Americans, thanks to lack of moral standards.